This is the cold room, cold storage, and we're going to talk about this in just a second. But I thought you might like to see how amazing it is that this many plants can be kept alive with absolutely no soil whatsoever. So we're still at NVK Nurseries, and we are now in the, what actually do you call this? Just cold storage? Bare root barn. Bare root barn. Yeah. And I am with Paul de Groot and Lucas Campen, and we're just going to talk about what this is and why we do it and how cool it is actually, basically. So take it away, guys.
Why would somebody want to plant bare root? Why would somebody want to sell bare root? Most important thing is a nursery that sells trees with bulbs gives away their soil. That's expensive stuff. To rejuvenate a field, you got to bring in a bunch of topsoil or compost. Come on, what's the right word?
And that's being disallowed in many provinces. I think only Nova Scotia, New Brunswick allows, as of 2017, they only allow the stripping and selling of soil now. So it's a big deal.
Did not know that. What does it take to store bare root? You need to keep the humidity up. In here, it's about 97%. If the tree roots dry out to dry, that tree is probably dead. You need to maintain humidity, and you want to maintain dormancy, so you keep it cool in here. In here it's only, 2 degrees Celsius right now? It needs to stay there to maintain that dormancy so that when you bring that tree out into the heat of the summer, it's still dormant, it still thinks it's winter, and then it can go through its regular cycle of warming up, coming into bud, and growing leaves.
So the two big things are temperature and humidity. And the way that you do humidity, I've always thought was really cool. As soon as the floor starts to dry out, you know that the humidity is dropping, so you wet things down.
Water the floors, water the roots, and try to keep the water off the tops. Otherwise the tops will begin to rot.
Good to know.
Why would you plant bare root? They're a whole lot easier to carry around. Those things are, you can carry a bundle of 5 or 10 like this, whereas if you're planting trees that have a root ball, they get heavy. Okay, the best time to be planting them would be before the May long weekend. You can get away with middle of June, early July. Well, okay, now you're pushing your luck because it's way too warm outside and the tree needs to go through its dormancy and then growing leaves and growing a little bit before winter hits again when they have to go dormant again. I've seen trees that were planted too late and the leaves stayed on after frost. It sets them back because the next year they need to start again at dormancy. If they still have last year's leaves on, then what they call that abscission has not occurred, and they're going to start out behind because they're using next year's buds.
And we talked about potting the trees up, but you can also buy bare root trees and plant them directly into the landscape as long as they're dormant, but you have to be super careful with them, keep them bagged, humid, and in the shade until you're ready to plant them. And probably staking is becoming more optional now. We don't stake unless we have to, but bare root trees, I think, would be pretty much, you'd have to stake them.
Not always.
Not always?
Not always.
All dependent on what the roots look like when you're putting it in the ground. If they're just the thick, solid ones, then yeah, a stake or T-bar and true wire is good. But if you got a lot of fibrous roots and you're really shaking it and getting the soil around, it's as if it just was in the ground naturally, right? So The more fibrous roots, the sturdier it is in the ground.
We're moving away from the wire staking now. Now we're finally looking. The recommendations are to use biodegradable ties, which is good. And one of the things that I'm really happy is in the Ontario Landscape Tree Planting Standard is Ontario Landscape Tree Planting Guide is to stake perpendicular to the prevailing wind so that it can move a bit but move gently between the stakes. The other important thing is that these are dug in the fall, which might not be a given to the watching audience. These plants are dug after the leaves fall off in the field, and then in your case, some of them are shipped here and some of them you dig here, right? Right.
Some trees, there are some families of trees that don't really respond well to fall digging and storage for the winter. Most of the prunus don't want to be dug in the fall. A lot of the natives actually don't like to be dug in the fall.
Birch and maple?
Birch is one. We do it because you need to sometimes, but they respond much better if you dig them in spring. Some trees don't even want to be bare root at all, and birch is one of those. Beech is another one.
And the reason that you dig in the fall is because you can get into the field, right? Like if you could dig in the spring.
Sometimes we do dig in the spring too. Like if we weren't able to get into the field in the fall because the field was too wet, or the snow came too early, or the frost came too early, then we'll dig that remainder in the spring.
Okay.
But yeah, it is surprising what bare root could pull off too. I've had, like, talking about dormancy and all the trying to keep the buds dormant and keeping them from not pushing in the barn. Because we'll have, like, peach and nectarine is one example, and cherry, where they'll be in the barn in the cold storage, and you'll start seeing the buds open up, like the leaves are ready to come out, but they're still in this cold storage. So then it's a little bit tricky. You gotta pot it, maybe try to keep it in the shade so that those leaves, when they do open, they don't get fried by the sun, which is one big thing. But like I've had apples, for instance, I've had apples sit in a bag in my garage at my parents' house years back till July. No leaves, no buds, and then I planted it. But I planted it somewhere shady. And they didn't do much growth, so you won't get much growth, but they still survive. So they can pull off a bit, but it's all about looking at the bud and deciding if it's pushed too far.
That's sort of a double-edged sword. Stuff from here, from Ontario, tends to be careful. It's cautious. Stuff that's not from here is a bit goofy. As soon as it thinks that maybe there's a chance, they start leafing up, which is why fruit trees so often get hit by early frosts.
Yeah.
And I don't even know whether it's that they will rot sitting in here, but I know that this company will not dig willow unless it absolutely has to. As I said, prunus is another family. I hate prunus anyway. Sorry.
I think for willow, I think it's a lot to do with the softness of the wood too, because willows are really soft. So you'll notice desiccation in the branching if it's dug in the fall and it's sitting in the barn over the winter, right?
Right.
You'll notice desiccation in the branching because it's such a soft wood.
That's it.
And oaks and beech, one reason why they don't like being bare rooted is because there's not enough fibrous roots. They like their really big tap roots. And one thing we're trying to change in using a gravel bed is trying to cut the roots at a younger age and get those fibrous roots pushing. And it's insane the amount of roots you'll get in a gravel bed with the oaks and beech.
I didn't know that you were doing gravel bed
We're
planting.
doing trials, yeah.
Do you want to talk about that a little bit? Because that's really cool, gravel bed planting.
Like the process, or
Yeah, and the benefits.
so I didn't work in that section in the trial area, but I did kind of take a peek in and out of it. So basically, it's pea gravel, like really small round gravel bits, and you plant it in a row just as if you would in the field. And we're trying varieties like oak, beech, anything with really, really hard roots. Another one is Austria virginiana, carpinus, stuff like that really like their tap roots, and they don't do much fibrous roots unless you get that undercut to push the small little root branches. But basically, they get planted in pea gravel in a row, and you keep that gravel wet after you had undercut the roots already, and you notice they just explode. And it's something you never see on an oak or a beech. Like, it's just insane. They just explode.
That's Dr. Ed Gilman from the University of Florida. He's doing that research, and as you say, beech and oak, if you just dug them, you'd have big roots with nothing else. But when you're doing them in the gravel beds, you can grab them in full leaf, rip them out of the ground, and they have root systems that are fibrous, like the plants behind me. It is crazy cool. I have reservations about how much aftercare they would need when you put them in the landscape, if you're doing that.
I've seen them planting bare root in full leaf in August, street tree planting in Boston. And I couldn't believe that these things in full leaf
There we go. All right.
would do just fine.
Seeing is believing. One of the things that we have never talked about when we're doing this presentation, I guess, is the girdling roots. Again, this is Dr. Gilman, and they're recommending, and they've done all kinds of studies, that if you have girdling roots, take an old saw that you don't care much about and shave off 2 inches of the entire root ball. All those girdling roots go, which seems terrifying. But
it seems counterproductive to cut half of the roots off, but it works.
and then you get this new lovely fibrous root system growing, and then the tree lives closer to its full lifespan because it's not going to strangle itself when those roots grow and the trunk grows. You just have lots of roots growing outwards from the center.
Yeah, it's incredible what trees can do. Like even you're talking about planting in August. Like when we upgrade our smaller potted stuff to bigger pots, you're almost bare rooting them because the technique you're saying, shaving off the edge. We have a little hook with a sharp point, and we'll pull apart the roots to make sure that they're not round circling. We'll pull them apart, and there's not much soil left on those things, and they're full leaf. We'll put them in fresh soil, fresh fertilizer. Depending on the time of year, sometimes we'll keep them under shade so the leaves don't get any scalding because they'll push new little growths because it's getting fresh soil, fresh fertilizer. So it's just it's very dependent on your variety and time of year, but you can plant midsummer if you're doing it right and you're planting in the right spot.
This whole conversation is interesting in that never stop learning. This is not what we talked about 15 years ago when I started teaching. We were not aware of the consequences of what we were doing to the trees. We plant them, they grow, we walk away. And now so much is being done that changes the air root pruning pots, the root pruning, the gravel beds. This is all new and exciting stuff. And it took our industry, old folks are slow to change, it took our industry a while to pick up on some of these new cool ideas. But what we're talking about today is amazing stuff. And we're planting better plants that are going to live longer. When you're talking about something where you plant 5 trees and they take up enough carbon dioxide to offset your entire use for a year once they get going, trees are important. And when they can add, $40,000 to the value of your home, trees are important. So it's really neat to see how far we've come, how fast. Even when you were in my class,
Yep.
we didn't talk about almost any of this stuff.
Yeah, it's about getting an opportunity to grow your own knowledge, having that freedom to try stuff out, right? Which is what this company's really getting into, right?
Yeah.
So it's been a good learning process the past 2 years.
Gentlemen, thank you very much
Yeah.
for doing this. Really appreciate it.
The more we learn about trees, the more we know that we know so little about trees that we are amazed. We're learning more about trees and roots and leaves and the relationships, the oxygen in the soil. We never used to do that. We just stick them in the ground and walk away.
Shigo was the first guy to do any research on it. We didn't do any research until Dr. Alex Shigo came along. And then he sort of kickstarted the whole process of finding out actually why trees do what they do, doing real studies to see how they react to things and is this better than that and what soil and so on. Still lots to learn, I'm sure.
My name is Lucas Campen. I've worked at NVK for close to 6 years. I also was in Sean James's class a few years back. It was a bit of a pain in the arse, but It's all good. So I'm just gonna give you a little walkthrough on how we prune our trees for potted tree production. Field production is a little different when the way we prune it. And I'm also gonna show you how to plant. And these steps you can follow into the land, take them into the landscape and do the exact same thing. So to start, you got your tree, you always take a look at it. If you got anything dead, broken, that's the first thing you take out. Then I always like to open it up next. So taking out branches that are gonna interfere or cause problems in the future. Like you can see here, this one's running right into this guy here already. So that's one thing you take out. So you always open it up, dead, broken ones, you take those out. So let's start by opening her up. Even the little ones, if the little ones you think are gonna cause a problem in the future, just take them out. And then you work your way up. There's a few more little ones in here, I'll take them out. And this guy in here, right here, they're gonna end up touching too. We'll take that guy. Open up in here, these two smaller ones are gonna go right for the bigger ones. You'll also notice I'm not cutting right to the bark of the main stem. You always wanna leave a little chunk so nothing desiccates back into it. Little guys here we'll take out. And then you go right back.
Scaffold pruning, what you're doing there, because you're creating the scaffold that the tree will grow into.
You're setting up your branches for the future. All right, and then I always start at the bottom again. So you got your more or less your main branches, and you one thing I always, when I'm teaching the guys on the crew how to prune, always make sure you start on the bottom. You got roughly 3 inches to the next step, and I always do it in steps. So your first step is the bottom two. So we're gonna tip back to a bud. Now these, you always look for buds depending on the variety of tree that are going outwards. When you prune to an outward bud, the branch is gonna shoot out, which is what you want. You don't want it shooting inside or that's causing problems again.
And
So,
why are you tipping them back?
so the reason we're tipping them back is if you don't tip these two back, what's gonna happen is they're gonna start passing these guys right here. And then when you wanna limb up your tree in the future, let's say you want the branching to start up here, you're gonna have a huge problem because you're gonna have two main branches on the bottom that are taking up half your tree. So you always wanna do it in steps. If your branching's here, it's gotta be a little shorter than the next one above it. So that in the future, the option's there to limb it up. And it's not gonna take out half your tree. So we tip these two back. Now we got a shorter one here. It's too short, I'm not gonna tip it. There's no point. If I tip it, it's gonna be stunted. It's gonna get passed regardless by these. So by tipping these, I stop them. They're gonna push out little branches, go a little slower because they gotta push a few branches, but this one, it's gonna keep shooting longer. And then hopefully in the future, that one catches up to this guy here. So we're also gonna tip this back, and you'll notice it's a little longer than the one below it, which is what you want. So this guy here, also a little short. We're gonna let him shoot for another year. And then this is the next step. We'll give him a tip to an outside bud. And then here's another little tip for you to do. So this one's got two branches. So you're more than welcome just to tip these to slow them down a bit. They're still gonna push out. If you wanna take them out in the future, you have the option. And then we're gonna slow these down too. And we'll take this guy out. Now these are really young here. I'm not gonna tip them. We'll let them shoot, but we'll slow these ones down. And then last step, tip your leader a bit, which promotes growth towards the bottom of the tree. If you don't tip the leader, this is gonna keep shooting longer and longer.
Which is very different from what you would do in the field. There's a huge difference between nursery production pruning and pruning in the field. You're trying to create a more compact, bushy, appealing plant that gives you more options in the long run. Whereas in the field, and some of the stuff that you're doing today, in the field, we would be pruning that to referee, to guide the tree to grow, to continue growing in the right form. So
Yep.
a big difference between this and what landscape maintenance folks would do.
Yeah, field pruning, you obviously are hitting them much harder. I like to keep the branching because we're gonna sell them this coming summer, fall. But once they're rooted into the pot, they're for sale. All right, so we've done that. Now you can see the shape we got here. These are slowed down. It's not gonna pass this one. We let these two younger ones, we'll leave them alone, let them do their thing for another year. And yeah, you got a nice little shape there. All right, so we're gonna jump down to the roots. We base our pot size off of previous sales from the year before, how quick they root in. It's a huge thing because you got an Acer rubrum here, and you got a Robinia here. This one roots in, it'll be rooted in even before summer hits. They root in super quick, just like a willow. So you can go with a smaller pot, even though it grows quicker, but it will be sold earlier than what this would be sold at.
Just
So
a quick sidebar. You've got one alternate species, Robinia, and you've got an opposite species, Acer.
Yep.
Which means when you tipped it back to 2 buds.
Yep.
At some point, someone will take off one of those buds so that you don't have predominantly.
With this variety, Red Rocket, it's a very columnar one. They're usually pretty good at hitting that outside bud instead of the inside.
Really?
Yeah.
Neat.
Robinia, they'll just explode, right?
Yes.
But you can also hit those harder. You notice I didn't hit these back like they would in the field. In the field, they'd be hitting them back to here.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. Because they want to get the caliper up to sell it as a caliper, right?
Ah.
So I barely touched this tree, but it's going to leaf out.
Okay.
And they're also, rubrums are a little slower to root in, especially with the roots we get from the States. They're not as fibrous. If they come from our field, they're rooted in early on, right? Because we've had the chance to root prune them once already.
You've also got a really good sandy loam here with prompts better root formation.
Yep. Yeah, like I was saying, you choose your pot based on the caliper of the tree, the variety of the tree, and also how much water the tree needs. So you notice I got 2 different pots here. One's actually got holes in it. So sugar maples will go in there. Any variety. Surprisingly, I know a lot of you people that are grass cutters hate Norway maples because they suck all the water out of the soil and kill the grass. But getting them rooted in from bare root is very difficult if you're not in one of these. Because the roots rot.
And these are a fairly new thing. These are air root pruning pots, which stop the roots from going around and around, which is another problem Norways have. In this, the root comes out and it hits a little hole and the tip dies, and then it goes sideways till it hits more holes. So you get a smaller, more compact, much more fibrous, much better root ball.
Yeah, so it has dual
These are
purpose.
awesome.
You can drains quicker and your roots don't curl. So yeah, I'm gonna prune this guy for this pot here. I'm gonna kind of walk you through it, but I'm gonna go for the bigger roots first, and we're just hitting the ones that are gonna hit the outside of the pot while trying to keep the stem of the tree in the middle of the pot. And that's strictly for shipping purposes too. And because you're gonna get some trees where the roots are only going one way, and you got to make it work with the pot. You don't want to cut all the roots off and kill it, right? So I always start with the bigger ones. We're gonna hit these guys here.
Good sharp pruning tools. A clean cut heals faster.
And then you'll notice after I got these bigger ones cut, you got all these smaller ones. So a long one like this, I'm gonna cut back a bit, just a bit, strictly for potting purpose on the machine behind us. If you shove it in there and you got a root hanging outside, then it just causes a big problem on the machine. So I always just tell the guys nip them back a bit. Other than that, we like to keep a lot of the fibrous roots because that's what's sucking up the water. And also by hitting these bigger ones, you can see the size of those. Just like a branch, as if you would prune a branch up in the tree, it's gonna shoot small little ones down here, but in a root form. So I left a lot of the smaller ones. Get it in the pot. Beautiful. And who would like to hold?
I will hold that.
You gotta,
Coming through.
Yeah. You need a mask? Or should we put a mask on?
I'm holding it now.
Alright. So yeah, as Sean is holding that tree, what I want him to do and what we do on the machine is we're always shaking it. You're always kind of getting a shake in because you want those roots to settle in naturally. If you just stick the tree to the bottom of the pot and fill it up with soil, they're all just going to be compacted awkwardly. You want to shake it, let them fall into place naturally. And he's also going to watch his collar because we want the collar of the tree or the crown, there's lots of different names, to be just at the edge here because we have roughly an inch of mulch going on top too. You gotta shake it. There you go.
Does that look too high to me?
Because once you pack it, it settles in too, right?
Oh, really? Okay.
Yep.
All right. This is good.
Yep. So this is the old way we used to do it. Now we have a machine for it, but... Yep. So, and then you're gonna go around, and you can follow these steps for planting a bare root tree exactly the same way. And using the end of a shovel is perfect, because it really gets that soil in and around everything. Some people will use their feet, but you're kind of just crushing the roots in there. You're not letting them set up naturally like they would.
This is much more precise too. You're getting it in between the roots.
Yep. So you're also looking to make sure your tree is upright and straight.
That's just a professional thing, really.
Yeah. Or,
Just plain professional.
So yeah, you can see how tight I got that in there. It's not moving. And then we do have fertilizer we put on top too, based on pot size, and then we put mulch over it.
Now this is what I was thinking with the new Ontario Landscape Tree Planting Standard. The root flare, it's actually pretty close, which is great. The root flare is right there. So you were saying that there's mulch going on top as well.
Yeah.
When you get this into the field, you're gonna clean away the loose stuff until you get down to where the trunk starts to flare out, the root flare, because that's what you want to have right at ground level when you plant your tree. So that's because of the way we have to plant trees, it's necessary to clear away the extra and expose that root flare when we put them into the landscape.
Yeah, or you start getting rotting. We noticed that even in potting in the previous years that your soil's too high, it'll just rot away here, and then you get all diseases going up in there, and it's just not good.